13 Tom and Jerry shorts made by the Czechoslovakian director Gene Deitch are infamous for their poor quality and rather disturbing nature, featuring badly done sound effects and animation, and having a more realistic feel to the violence. Some have speculated that Deitch didn't like the concept behind Tom and Jerry and was pressured into making them, and wanted to make the people who watched his take on it feel bad for liking the concept. What many people don't know is that Deitch was originally signed on to make more than the 13 episodes the public had access to. Desperate to get out of this contract, Deitch made one more Tom and Jerry short that few have ever seen. The short was called Tom's Basement. It opened with Tom in a typical Tom and Jerry house. His owner was the fat and angry guy from other Deitch shorts. Except even he seemed more angry than in his other appearances. The first scene is him stomping on Tom's tail because he was sleeping by the basement door. The owner yells at Tom to never go down there. Tom is clearly terrified and runs away to another room. Our view stays in the room by the basement door, and we see Jerry come out of a mouse hole. He looks truly grotesque, far more off-model than in the other shorts. He gets an evil look on his face and follows Tom into the next room. The next few minutes are fairly formulaic. Jerry repeatedly manages to trick Tom into chasing him into the basement door a few times. But each time the owner caught Tom, he inflicts a painful-looking injury on him, which sticks with him even after the scene ends. After 3 beatings, Tom is bruised all over, bleeding in a few places, and limping on a broken leg. Tom starts to literally beg Jerry not to bother him anymore. He's not really talking, but he's crying and mumbling, and you can tell him what he's doing by his body language. Jerry just laughs at him and pushes him back to the door. The owner catches Tom again and goes ballistic. The camera zooms in on his face. It changes color and distorts as he yells at Tom in a much louder voice than any other sound in the cartoon. I can't post most of what he said on here, but it's definitely vicious and furious. It seems that Jerry has finally decided to take pity on Tom, though. He picks up a knife that was lying around and stabs the owner in the leg, quite graphically. Tom opens the basement door, and they carry the owner's body down the stairs. There are dozens of other bodies down there, decaying and showing signs of their violent deaths. Tom and Jerry shake hands, and it seems like they've triumphed over the serial killer. But Jerry gets an evil look in his face again, and Tom says in that ghostly deep voice, Jerry kills Tom with the knife and throws his body into the pile. The last shot of the short is Jerry putting up a for sale sign on the yard of the house, laughing, clearly planning to do it all again. In the fall of 1987, local news channel WSB-TV2 of Atlanta, Georgia, was attempting to fill a scheduling gap in their Sunday morning lineup. After a few social solicitations by local business owners, they decided to allow the young Reverend Marley Sachs to take the available hour block to do a religiously themed show. It premiered October 18th with little promotion. The show was standard religious fare and consisted of the Reverend sitting in a sample chair reading passages from the Bible to the camera and discussing their interpretation and significance to our modern day-to-day life. The show received a reasonable number of views and continued to be shown into early December. It was then that the studio began to receive extremely strange complaints from viewers of Words of Light with the Reverend Marley Sachs. The calls were from women, and women only, who were vaguely referred to uncomfortable feelings they had at very specific intervals during the program. They described feelings of nausea, back pain, dizziness, and blurred vision. These callers, from no discernible reason, were convinced that it was the viewing of this program that was causing these symptoms. It was later determined after 3 weeks of complaints that these feelings were happening at roughly 12-minute intervals during the course of the program. The small studio staff checked all recording equipment, both audio and video, found nothing faulty. When the Reverend was made aware of these incidents, he merely shrugged and stated cryptically that some can't handle the voice of God. The head of the studio, at a loss to explain the cause of these complaints, decided to continue running the program. By February, viewership had dropped sharply and it was decided to pull the plug on the show. The studio head figured it would be more prudent to spend as much time as possible on the news story that had the other two local news networks abuzz: the miscarriage epidemic. Sometime in November, the number of healthy pregnant women miscarrying in the Atlanta metropolitan area had reached over 300. The CDC could find no discernible cause for this terrifying occurrence. The Reverend took the show's cancellation with what could only be described as abject indifference. When informed, he made no protest, simply nodded, almost knowingly. He left the studio after the last episode was filmed without so much a word and dropped off the face of the earth. Nobody heard from him again, not his former congregation or any member of the church. The studio moved on, filling the slot with an infomercial, and continued to concentrate on the miscarriage story. A year and a half later, an intern at the WSB studios discovered the tapes of the Words of Light and began going through them in an attempt to find stock footage for an upcoming piece the station was doing on the impact religion had on the city. The Atlanta incident, as the miscarriage epidemic became known in medical journals, petered out 3 months after the studio canceled Reverend Sachs' show, and had already begun to fade from public conscience. As the intern went through the tapes, he accidentally made a disturbing discovery about the footage. While attempting to stop one recording at 10 minutes and 45 seconds, he mistakenly jammed the fast-forward button down. While the footage whizzed by, he attempted to pry up the button with a screwdriver. Just as he succeeded, the tape stopped at 32 minutes and 1 second. The intern fell out of his chair when he looked up at what was frozen on the screen. the image of a badly decomposed severed head filling up the entire frame. After he collected himself, he moved the film back a few frames, then forward, and realized that his mind was not playing tricks on him. He began going through the rest of the recording to discover that at exactly 12-minute intervals, the image would appear for one frame. Thinking it was some sort of practical joke being played on the new guy, he presented it to one of the film technicians, ready to be mocked. The technician was just as puzzled as him. No one had touched the footage since the cancellation of the show. After the studio closed for one night, the intern convinced the tech to help him go through all the tapes of Words of Light. They discovered that every single episode had this same horrifying anomaly every 12 minutes. They also realized that as the show progressed, the image had become more disgusting as maggots began to eat away at the loose flesh, and pieces of hair and skin seemed to have fallen off exponentially. The tech made clear to the intern that what they were seeing was technically impossible, since the film itself showed absolutely no signs of splicing, and he himself had been at every filming of the show and knew no time when this image could have been inserted into the frame. All of this was presented to the studio head, who, fearing some kind of backlash over allowing us to get all the air, ordered all tapes destroyed. He told the intern and tech he had no interest in knowing who did it at that point, only that covering their collective asses is all that's important now. He demanded that they mention this to nobody. The tech moved on, remembering the incident as a darkly funny personal anecdote. But the intern wouldn't let it go. He made copies of as many tapes as he could before they were wiped. Took them to see if he could find anything else on them that might point to whoever did this, or why. A week later, he attempted to rope the tech into helping him again, saying he believed he had discovered something even more disturbing than the images themselves. When the single frames were edited together in chronological order, the head's mouth appeared to be moving as if trying to form words. The tech, fearing for his job, told him to get rid of the copies and to not talk about it again. Another week later, police responded to a 911 call made by an elderly woman in one of the Atlanta suburbs at dusk. He had heard horrible noises coming from her next-door neighbor's house where a young couple lived. She told the responder that the wife was pregnant and that she was terrified that something had happened. When the officers arrived on the scene 20 minutes later, they found no lights on in the windows and the front door ajar. They moved in and made their way into the living room. Inside, they found a woman dead, with her abdomen slashed open. The wound was a jagged and a trail of blood led from the body to the couch on the far end of the room. There sat her husband, the studio intern, nude, the corpse of his unborn child at his feet, dying. In his hand, he held the rusty piece of metal siding he had used to gut his wife. His television was on and playing an 18-second loop of silent footage of a decomposing head mouthing some unintelligible words. The story at the police precinct to this day goes that the intern kept saying under his breath, over over and over again as they led them away. The light of God calls them.